Breaking news out of Sacramento. You're seeing it right here. Roads shut down as protesters spill onto the streets of downtown Sacramento, and coffins lining the streets as well as dozens of people make their voices heard and call for justice for Stephon Clark on the 6-month anniversary of the deadly police shooting.
And all of this is coming as law enforcement grieving the loss of one of their own one day after a deputy was shot and killed in a violent shootout that happened in Rancho Cordova. We brought it to you as breaking news yesterday at this time. Both sides mourning the deaths of people that they loved and demanding justice.
Glad you're with us tonight at 5 o'clock. I'm Nikki Lorenzo.
And I'm Eric Harriman. The death of Stephon Clark sparked major protests. That was 6 months ago. And now family and friends, the community from where Clark was from, demanding that the officers who shot and killed the 22-year-old are brought to justice. And those demands are just as strong now as they were then. And there have also been weekly protests at DA Schubert's office and city council meetings.
Here's some background on this story. Clark was killed in March. That was this year. 2 officers chased him into the backyard of his grandmother's home in South Sacramento. The officers said they believed he had a gun. Now, body cam video released by the Sacramento Police Department shows the moments before, during, and after the deadly shooting. Now, Clark only had a cell phone on him at the time. His family is seeking millions of dollars in damages from the city of Sacramento. So
back to what's going on right now. These protests have been going on all day long, and it wasn't just the Black Lives Matter that was out there today. There were also counter protesters that also showed up.
As you can see, we have team coverage for you tonight on these protests. We'll get to Fox 40's Joe Khalil in just a moment, but first, let's head out to Fox 40's Doug Johnson. Doug, you've been out there all day. Set the scene for us.
Eric and Nikki, they've actually taken down many of the barricades out here at the Sacramento Convention Center. A much calmer scene right now, but a lot of the protesters told us they had planned this protest long before yesterday when that deputy was shot and killed, and they feel that Sacramento Sheriff Scott Jones is trying to change their message.
What do we want? Justice! 6-month anniversary, it's a slap in the face that they have not even attempted to apologize to me for killing my son.
Along with several hundred protesters, the family of Stephon Clark says they came to the California Peace Officers Association Cop West event at the convention center to call for justice.
I just want people to be held accountable. I don't think that's too much to ask for,
Tuesday marks the 6-month anniversary since Clark was shot and killed. His brother Stephon Clark says this convention just feels like bad timing.
It does feel like a slap in the face because I was actually planning to be at the gravesite all day. Now I can't do that because we have to stand in solidarity.
But he says he understands this does feel like bad timing as well after what happened to Sacramento Sheriff Deputy Mark Stasio.
And to hear the officer get shot yesterday, that hurts too. We don't promote death. We don't want anybody to die.
Sacramento police officers formed a barrier between the Black Lives Matter group and others who came out to show support for law enforcement in the wake of Stasio's death. BLM organizers believe the other group only came after Sacramento Sheriff Scott Jones asked them to.
I think that was unprofessional, and I think that he pulled a Donald Trump. He's trying to incite violence.
Later, protesters staged a die-in, blocking J Street for about an hour.
I hereby declare this to be an unlawful assembly.
There were tense moments as police gave several warnings that if protesters did not get out of the street, officers would remove them by force.
If you do not disperse, you may be arrested or subject to other, less lethal conditions.
But eventually those blocking the street left, marching down through downtown Sacramento and blocking streets as they moved.
In Sacramento this year alone, someone is getting killed by the police every 3 months. And so that's a problem.
And back out here live, you're seeing people leaving the convention center. These are many of the law enforcement community that were here for that training. And a lot of the protesters we talked to said that they did also want to send a message to them. They're from agencies from across the state, and they wanted to let them know that whenever innocent people who are unarmed are shot and killed, this is what's going to happen. Reporting live in downtown Sacramento tonight, Doug Johnson, Fox 40 News.
All right, Doug, and a quick question for you here. Just at the top of the newscast, we mentioned that there were also counter protesters out there. We know that there are people that are out there supporting law enforcement. To your knowledge, based upon what you've seen since you've been out there, has there been anything that's gone in any kind of a violent direction between the two in the last couple of hours?
Well, Eric, there were certainly some tense moments. The police did have to get between these two groups. A lot of yelling, but no physical violence between the two of them. Most people were just venting, yelling at each other, various things. But again, police were pretty quick to separate those two groups and to get the bicycles in between them. So yeah, no punches thrown, anything like that.
All right, Doug Johnson live for us tonight in Sacramento. Doug, thank you. And our team coverage continues for you tonight at 5 o'clock, this time with Fox 40's Joe Khalil.
And Eric, you mentioned the counter protesters out there. Joe, we know a large number of them showed up today. What was their message?
Yeah, we were here on that side of the protest, Nikki. If you talk to a lot of them, many said that they were here directly because of what Sheriff Jones said yesterday, sort of calling for people to be out here. Now, we also did speak with Sheriff Scott Jones. He said he wasn't directly calling for demonstrators to come and be sort of a counter protest to Black Lives Matter. He was simply asking for support in the wake of his deputy's death. One street, two dueling demonstrations, and it eventually came to this.
I hereby declare this to be an unlawful assembly, and in the name of the people of the state of California, order all those assembled at 13th and J Street to disperse immediately.
I mean, it was a convenient coincidence for them, frankly, but as we've all seen, they don't need a reason, a date, or an anniversary to protest, as we see every day at the DA's office.
Sheriff Scott Jones dismissive of a Black Lives Matter protest to mark the 6-month anniversary of the death of Stephon Clark. It was planned to coincide with a law enforcement expo. What wasn't planned? The protest fell just one day after the tragic death of Sheriff's Deputy Mark Stasiuk.
Yesterday, a law enforcement officer was needlessly gunned down and another was seriously injured. And my wife and I, it broke our heart.
He only ever did anything he could to try to help the community.
Stephen Long says Deputy Mark Stasiuk was a close friend. Here today, he says, because Sheriff Jones called for people to come to support the department in light of the tragedy.
He was a good officer and he was trying to make the world a better place.
While Long and others felt the BLM protest one day after a deputy's death was tone deaf and disrespectful, BLM protesters made their own emotional pleas.
Black Lives Matter!
And while many law enforcement officers grieved inside the expo, others donned riot gear, preparing for violent confrontations outside. Now, being out here, the mood throughout the afternoon was absolutely tense, but thankfully there were no violent clashes one way or another. At one point, we did hear officers say that they would potentially use non-lethal munitions to break up that crowd, but sort of at the last minute after their final call, that crowd eventually did disperse and leave J Street here just behind us. Reporting live downtown, Joe Khalil, Fox 40 News.
Joe, thank you. And we also know Reverend Al Sharpton is coming back to Sacramento. He's expected to be here tomorrow evening, and he will be calling on state and local leaders to expedite the internal investigation on the shooting death of Stephon Clark. Of course, Fox 40 will have the very latest on what Reverend Al Sharpton is demanding. That's coming up tomorrow evening again at 5 and 6 o'clock. And in the meantime, Fox 40 will continue to follow the latest on these protests. Be sure to download our free Fox 40 app. You can also find the story on our homepage, or you can just search Stephon Clark.